Hey, good afternoon, guys. We're going to start the weekly scan here. Hope everyone had a good weekend. Let's go ahead and just start with MU. I've talked about this one endlessly, and I think it's set up pretty nicely. Actually, before I jump into MU's chart, I want to bring back an analog, specifically from a lot of the 2022 ARKK accumulations. And the specific one I want to talk about is Roku, if you guys remember Roku, where it basically had this gap right here, right? We basically had a 3 to 4 lower low accumulation. We ended up ripping. We kind of got an LPS here, and then we ended up pushing up and absorbing this resistance here, this little red line. I'll make it red. You guys can see it kind of broke through it a little bit. It broke back under. It broke back through it a little bit. It broke back under, and then it had a big shakeout candle right here, guys. Right? And then with that, we ended up seeing a really nice kind of like footprint candle, signaling that this was the bottom, right, of this kind of range and that it wanted to go higher, right? Large lower wick, still technically a higher low relative to the lows, and it ended up having one big push up into that resistance one more time. We got our final, in my opinion, absorption of that level, and then we ended up getting an LPS pullback, right? That really just based off of this kind of like high or the open from that footprint candle, right? We got a nice little higher low off of that, and then it ripped and then finally based the top of that gap, right? And then from there, it obviously continued up into the gap fill at 94.5. I'll show you guys the weekly for reference as well, right? Once again, absorption of this level here, ton of absorption, breakdown, shakeout candle, high volume, rips back up, turns that into support, which is the open of that footprint candle, rips, bases, right, kind of like a flag, and then it rips again, right? Take a look at SMH now, really quickly. SMH kind of has the same look, right? A little bit different. I'll zoom out here onto the weekly though, but it hasn't been like a perfect tap of it, but we have a gap fill here, right, from here to here. We've pushed up into this spot, kind of got near it. I would consider this a little bit of absorption. We broke back down, pushed back up, got near it, technically absorbed, broke back down, pushed up, absorbed, broke down, pushed up, absorbed, and then take a look, right? We ended up having a big drop right here. Take a look, long lower wicks, massive volume, and then we ended up ripping up on low volume, very similar to the previous move, and then take a look where we're kind of pulling back to, for in my opinion, which is an LPS, right? Chart looks fantastic. I think this is the same exact analog as Roku. Like I said, a lot of other 2022 names have done this same exact move, but this is why I'm pretty adamant on MU, or Lamb Research is another good alternative where you can pair the two. It doesn't really matter to me. And it doesn't have to necessarily be right off the open, right? It could be off of the high here. So, oh, excuse me, it doesn't have to be like perfect, right? But it definitely is pulling back, in my opinion, for a higher low based off of this kind of the shakeout candle, right? And the shakeout candle, like I said, is cumulative, right? It usually marks back up on that, and then the pullback from that slow volume. And then we see a high volume continuation. And this is usually how we get our jump the creek, too. Once we ended up kind of pulling back here, we end up getting some kind of gap up or a big move above, and then we finally base the top of this gap here. And this finally turns into support, right? And then this is what really shakes out shorts, and then we get the large move that we're looking for. So really clean move here. So that's kind of the analog there, which is why I'm bullish on SMH. And I mean, I guess I can go back too. I mean, I think I've shown you guys. Take a look at the weekly as well. Weekly, really all of this is tied into this previous high right here, right? You guys can see pretty much high volume on this breakdown here, right? Remember, this is kind of like the beginning phase of a reaccumulation, in my opinion. So accumulation obviously occurred way back here, but this markup obviously pushed up higher and kind of sold out, and then it broke down, and I think this was the reaccumulation, and then it fit right into this little pocket here. And you guys can take a look. Anytime it kind of comes to the bottom of the range, there's large lower wicks with high volume. When we get to the highs, it sells off on low volume, and then really, right, you guys can see it once again, it kind of broke and tried to bait buyers into the gap fill here, and it sold off and printed a kind of like a shooting star on low volume, right? And then it gapped down, and then your true signal, which is the buyer, came in at the lows here once again after these sellers, or I guess technically the buyers got trapped up here, right? True signal was down here. Very interesting chart. Take a look at the monthly as well. The compression on this is pretty ridiculous, but once again, take a look at the volume from this candle here. Large lower wick, closed back above this old high. high volume again, although not as high as this one, but large lower wick, close back above, and then the compression for the last 4 months has been absurd. This is obviously that liquidity trap candle. Um, yeah, this chart I think is setting up for something pretty crazy. And it looks a lot like the 2022 names. But if we tie this into MU, right, this is why I think this is the LPS. I started a little bit here on Friday. I did say, right, there's a couple levels, technically two, where this could work. It sucks. I should have just trusted my gut. I could have got a nice little double dip here because I was right. This was basically just attempting to fill 103, right? Maybe extend a little bit into 109 to pull in buyers above that level, and then it was going to sell off, right, underneath 103 down into 99.52, which was our NWOG, right? Remember, this was the NWOG I was talking about, and I was looking for longs off of this spot, or I was looking for longs off of this spot, right? I should have trusted my gut. I should have held those 20 cons. That would have been like 3 or 4K that I could have added to the long. It always sucks when you have people in chat fading you for no reason. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. But um, yeah, I mean, I should have just held it. I know what I'm capable of. So it is what it is. But my main focus on this is just the long. So I took a couple starters here on July's, as you guys saw, just to see if it could hold this level or maybe gap back above that spot. But really, a lot of my ads are going to come off of this level here, right around 95, right? So it's not perfect because I'm not tying it straight to the gap. You guys should know this chart pretty well by now, but it really ties into this old gap back here, which became support in this large range that we have here, right? I mean, we've been in this forever now. So that's really where the basis of this comes from. Support from here, 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 right? And here, this was a resistance or an SR flip now. So I'm being pretty flexible. I started, I think, 6 here, and then I'm looking to take like another 10 to 15 if we can hit 95.77 and print some kind of reversal bar. I didn't add on Friday, so don't think that I added. I asked a question if anybody wanted to add on Friday. I didn't. I just started 6 or so. So this is where I'll probably add if we can hold or touch 95.77. Still, I don't want to be completely full size just yet, right? I've talked about this. There is the weird odd chance that this ends up from earnings, which is coming up on March 20th. This sells all the way to 81.5, which is this unfilled gap back here, which is what has been kind of like something that I've been a little worried about because it could happen. We've talked about this before with Shop doing almost the same exact thing, if you guys remember, right? We were buying down here, right, and then it ripped, and then it kind of gave like a fake breakout here, like a UTAD. All those analysts came out that they were looking to buy the stock. They were upgrading PTs, and of course they sold it, and it sold all the way down into this gap here. This gap finally filled, right, and then it ripped all the way back up through, and all these positive news catalysts came out, et cetera, and it finally filled the gap. I think MU could do something like that, which is why, I'll have a pretty decent sized position around 95.77, but I won't exceed like 50K. A lot of my position sizing, honestly, is going to be saved for the share side of things if we do come down to 81.5, and I'll add, obviously, into the options again. But I'm trying to be as flexible with this one as I can without being too, what's the word? Irresponsible with my account. But I do think this is a home run play, right? Just that's the only worry, is it sells from earnings down to 81.5. Even then, I think I will buy that dip. But yeah, ideally, right, we just kind of have a small secondary pullback right here to 81.5. It ends up breaking back above. We turn this into support. We rip again, turn in 103.19 into support. Rip again, turn 109 into support, and then rip again, turn 115 into support, right? And then obviously have enough time to be able to create a trend up into 123 is kind of the goal here. Hasn't changed, right? If we take a look, let me delete all that real quick, all the little trend lines and stuff. Not going to do it. Sorry about my voice, by the way, guys. I think I have COVID, but I'll be okay. Anyways, the weekly here, I think I showed you guys not the most handsome print. Obviously, it was just a target trade, and then it kind of taking profits. But the sellers haven't really shown their hand here. So that's relative to SMH, kind of what we've seen across the market. The dark pool buyers that we've seen across multiple equities, but specifically SPY QQQ, right, that I showed you guys on Friday. I think this is a buyable dip. And really all it did was fill target, profit takers, and it's pulling right back down to the bottom of this range, right? And it's just been trading this range for literally forever now. And this is going to have an explosive move. I think it's from earnings. But yeah, you guys can see barely any volume on this at all. So true intent is, once again, not selling. We just have to wait for that hand to show from buyers, which is why I keep talking about a footprint candle. We'll know when we see it, right? This isn't technically a footprint candle. It's got a little bit of higher volume, but no really large extended lower wick. No real sign that a big buyer has entered and is trying to push this up, right? So that's number one here. Let's take a look at Lamb Research next. Okay, MU is another great alternative if you guys don't want to take MU or if you guys want to pair it with MU. Really good chart here. Remember, we had kind of like our stage one breakout here where we had a kind of like an internal high. We ended up kind of breaking above that. This is where I took profits on those June 105s. I probably should have added some more on the pullbacks here, but it went a little bit lower than I would have liked. But nonetheless, it reclaimed this internal range high, and then we ended up having a big breakout in the more recent days, right, above 85.8. Relevance of this level is this old weekly swing low, right? Big support here that ended up ultimately turning resistance kind of here, here, here. Obviously, profit takers took profits into that level back here on 122, but now we broke above, right? And if we take a look at the weekly obviously is kind of signaling kind of a bearish bar, increased volume, but it's important to take a look at where that volume came from, right? In the context of it, a lot of that volume was the breakout from this, and then the extension higher, right? And then the true sell-off, which was kind of like our engulfing bar, was on lower volume, albeit a lot of stocks look like this where we don't really have a large lower wick, kind of, indicating this is trying to push up higher and that level is trying to be protected. But that's why it's important to just keep it on watch. We'll see where this ends up opening up on Monday. If it can open up right around the close or somewhere relatively close to 85.8, we can see kind of an extension off of that level, maybe a pullback, and then buyers signal they want to have a higher low and they can protect it from coming back to 85.8. I think that's a valid entry. And I saw some flow, and I kind of like the idea here for my roll, if I am going to take this, right? Just targeting this seller's ask here at 89.98, so using the $90 call strike. I'll show that on the screen here really quickly, right? Super simple. So this is one part of the order here is LRCX. Looks like it was 1.54 million into the June 20th $90 call. You can see, they swept the order, but here's all the pairing orders with that. So it was multiple orders of that. And if we just kind of tie that in to one singular order, right? I think this is off. It says 764,000, but obviously it was a little bit more than that. But yeah, they got all their fills right around 6.73. A little bit of profit taking. Somebody maybe they had too much size and they wanted to take off 200K of it. But yeah, pretty big order here on Lamb Research, right? Anything over 10 usually works. So 14 orders paired there. Like I said, a large amount of premium. Really sick chart that we've been stalking for a while that has a really clean entry. So Lamb Research, definitely kind of like a second opportunity here if you guys miss that or if you want to pair or alternatively take it to MU. Really nice chart. Okay, Google is kind of on the back end. Remember, I just have starters on these, which I took kind of right around this range here, right? So the top of this gap fill like right there. I did say I was going to save, the full size position for down here, 175.37. I'm not going to exceed 10 contracts, so I'm just kind of waiting for this to pull back down into 175.37. It shows a buyer footprint, right? I will get into this one, and ideally the pathway for this one's relatively simple, where we get a kind of a break back to the top of the gap. We'll likely reject, higher low, break above, base that, right? And then we can start to trend back up towards this footprint candle here. Remember, this is always important. It's always important to mark the high, low, or you can mark, I guess, like technically the start of the gap, right? Which would be, in this case, the open here, since we gap down. So always important to mark that. And these footprint candles from earnings are immense, right? I can't emphasize how important they are. So that's kind of the pathway here if it ends up going a little bit further down. Obviously this one has a little bit more high volume than some of the other names in semis that obviously sold with the rest of the market. So I do expect this one to either gap down or just have some continuation into 175.37, but I am waiting for the spot here at 175.37, right, to take an ad on this one. Pretty simple idea here, right? Just waiting for this gap to fill. Weekly, obviously, this is a key spot, right? This is pretty much the start of this big breakout here. Take a look at the weekly, right? Besides that Friday candle, the volume's relatively low and relatively flat. So really just watching this one, guys. This is a big one. I emphasize this a lot. Pelosi's in this one. I don't think she's added into it. I haven't seen any ads on this one. But really forefront of the quantum computing I guess quantum computing realm, right? A lot of people. What was the other one? A lot of people were looking towards. I can't think of the name for them. Was it IONQ? Someone's got to help me. I didn't pay attention to that quantum stuff too much in terms of what stocks went crazy, but Google is obviously going to be a big one here. So yeah, I like the name on this one. Just got to wait and be a little bit patient for that pullback here. And then last but not least, I'll try to tie these all into one. My voice keeps giving out midway through. SPY here. Remember I said I don't know where the bottom's going to be necessarily. I've been playing around with it. I do think that, if we take a look at the activity of volume right around here, I technically think that this is kind of like our buy climax, like right around there. So if we kind of look at this, right, and if we look at it from a weekly perspective, this almost looks like an up thrust phase, right? So up thrust, right, if we take a look at like distribution, this should only pull back down to worst case scenario 590, which would be the equilibrium of this whole range to the midpoint. And then from there, I think we could get a crazy rally back to the highs, and that makes a lot of sense from a data-driven narrative, right? We talked about those dark pool prints that came in on Friday with a ton of velocity. Remember, we had 43 prints back to the highs. A lot of people are expecting a gap down, and I actually kind of hope for a gap down. I've caught a lot of these trades, guys, where we end up having crazy news, and if you guys didn't see, the news on Friday was a new COVID strain scare where they're thinking a new pandemic might come out. It's a little bit sketchy, man. I mean, it was 5 years to the date. If we take a look, I'll toss these on really quickly. Take a look at our expiration Friday. Oh, yeah, we got to go to the daily for this. Expiration Fridays. I did say in between this OPEX and this OPEX, I expected a decline, right? So, we might get a 3 lower low that extends the entire month of kind of like, not the entire month of February, the beginning part of March, and then we'll start to maybe climb back up going into this OPEX and this OPEX, right? I think that we could really rally back towards those highs. So I'm expecting a 3 lower low accumulation down into 590, some kind of stimulus or some kind of quantitative easing from the Fed. If it doesn't come from the Fed, I think honestly Doge might be the catalyst for this. I know I'm being a little speculative here, but I think I see an opportunity here, right? For a lot of people really trying to get the short. A lot of people have been waiting to short this market for a really, really long time. And a lot of these engulfing candles do kind of recover. But yeah, I would like to see some kind of NWOG where we gap down, right? We accumulate and then we mark back up into the NWOG, and I think we can trend, by March going into April, right? I could see us trending even higher. That's why I started the 6,500 SPX. I tentatively started them, right? I started 2, but worst case scenario, if we can just tie this into levels, because like I said, I don't know where bottom's going to be, guys. I really don't. I mean, we have a little bit of a higher low here, but this is a really jumbled range that we've been in for 3 months. Really kind of relying on the weekly EMAs here, right? If we kind of take a look at the weekly, not super crazy volume that we saw on the weekly bar. So I think what could save this, honestly, would be our EMAs, right? Our 21 here, our 20 EMA, right around that 390 spot. I could see us maybe getting a 3 lower low accumulation into our kind of like mid-March going into the OPEX, and then OPEX kind of launching us up. Obviously, the OPEX also ties into FOMC. And I would look for a big extension through 610, to be completely honest. I think this could give us that UTAD, right? And then from there, that UTAD lasts probably into May, June, and then I've talked a little bit about the 5-year notes being due. I think that liquidity could get taken off the table. A lot of those people don't want to pay the 6%, 7% interest rate where they had a 0% essentially interest rate back in COVID, right, during 2020 when they borrowed that liquidity or that capital, right? That could be completely massive, and I think that would be kind of the pathway all the way back down to fill the gap at 582. Even if that, man, let's say we go a little bit lower and we sell to 582, which is that CPI gap fill, I still think that that's a long, right? So if we break under 590, I'll probably close those 2 SPX calls and take a loss on them, and then look to re-add something right around 582 if we can see a buyer off of that. But I'm not afraid of this candle. I'm really not. I think a lot of people are overreacting. yeah, I'm not overreacting. We've seen this happen so many times. It's a little funny for China to release that news right as we're kind of placing tariffs on them. It seems like just a scare to get the froth out of the market. I think the market lost what, $1 trillion, $2 trillion on Friday alone, um, going into a potentially really bullish cycle, right, with quantitative easing potentially being on the table here. So that's something I am watching. If we kind of go through the list, right, MU, LRCX are kind of top of the food chain in terms of position sizing. Those will be full size positions. Obviously, I talked about it. MU, got to save a lot of that capital for a full size position for that potential 81.5, right, where I would take a big bulk of add if they miss on earnings and they drop to that spot. It'd be shares. So if we can open right around that level, yes, I would average into that position. My stop loss would be underneath 81.5. It has to be because I'd have almost, who knows, man, I could be over 100, 200K in that position at that point. But still, I think that's a fat pitch we have to keep our eyes on. Lamb Research, probably 5 to 10 contracts. Google, not going to exceed 10 contracts. SPX here, if we can get the ads that I want to see, right? I think this is an opportunity to add into this position as well. No more than like 5 to 10, but right now I'm at 2. As for a level that's reclaimed, we can use our progression gaps, right? Simple progression gap here, which coincides really nicely with like right around there, which is our lower high range. So we can reclaim like 60250 to like 603-ish, right, which is this progression gap. I'll probably, look to add into this. So add into a winner, right? We've talked about adding into a winner, not really being scared of doing that. And I think we can start to trend back up, right, into that 610 spot. Obviously, take a majority of the profits off at that 610.38 level, and then hold runners for potential UTAD, right? Big up thrust through that high, euphoric high. I think we're going to get something crazy. But yeah, my mouth's getting super dry, guys, and my throat's hurting. So I'm going to end it here. That's pretty much it, guys. It's literally 4 charts. Obviously, I'll keep an eye on SPY or QQQ in the pre-market. If anything sets up, I'll obviously be updating the dark pool prints and kind of watching for the lower low accumulation. So if we make a new low or we gap down, I'll be watching those to see if they keep putting their sell orders and we see signs of accumulation as we're selling down and seeing where they're trying to mark price back up. Because remember, sellers don't want to sell low. They want to sell high to make profits. So important to keep our eyes on that. But that's going to be it, guys. Really streamlined weekly scan here. So I'll see you guys on Monday. Let's kind of hope for a gap down, if I'm being honest, and then we'll kind of keep our eyes on price throughout the week. But remember, I would say be patient through this range right here, right? I've talked about this between the 21st, which is this OPEX, into the next OPEX here on the 21st. So just a month. I know it sounds like a long time, but I promise I think this will be worth it, just being patient. And yeah, being selective with ads and keeping a couple charts in mind, I think we can have 2 to 3 home runs here. So I'll see you guys on Monday.